I'm Chef Richard. Welcome to Chef Richard Kitchen. On a previous episode, I made you a loaf or a couple of loaves of the Bohemian Christmas bread we call Hoska, and that was always one of the ways my family celebrated Christmas Eve. Is we always had a loaf or two of Hoska. Well, there's another bread very similar to it. We didn't have this, but there was a lot of other families that did. It's a German Christmas bread. It's called Stollen, Stollen, and in ways it's very similar, and in ways it's vastly different. And one of the things about Stollen is it has kind of a trace, or what do we call that? A little stream of marzipan down the middle of it, or a vein of marzipan is what we should call it. And I made the marzipan, and it was on a previous episode, so go ahead and watch that if you want to make your own marzipan. It's extremely easy, extremely inexpensive, and just go to it and do it. All right, let's start out with what we're going to need. We're going to need a cup of milk, lukewarm, or up to about 105 degrees. We're going to need a half cup of sugar, a stick and a half of butter, 2 to 3 tablespoons of yeast. Now remember, I use a commercial yeast, so it's measured in tablespoons in there. You'd probably need several packets, or 3 packets if you were using the packet type yeast. We're going to need 3/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg, 3/4 of a teaspoon of cardamom, a half teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of salt, the zest of 1 orange. Don't get the pith underneath it, just the yellow zest. 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract, 1 egg, and 2 egg yolks. And that's important to remember. 1 egg, 2 egg yolks. And then for the fruit filling, I used about 4 or 5 ounces of raisins. And I used a commercial bought. You buy these holiday fruit and nut mix blends that you use for fruitcake. Well, that's what I did for here. I put in about 3 to 4 ounces of that. And along with that, since it takes about 30 minutes to marinate, I also put in 1/3 of a cup of rum. And that's going to give some flavor too. And don't worry, all the demons are going to be boiled out of the rum before it's ever eaten. That's going to happen in the oven. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and put in our milk. And we're going to put in our sugar. And we're going to put in our yeast. Now, on previous episodes, I mentioned that I've used the yeast many times, and so I'm not necessarily going to proof it. Well, this time I've got a new package of yeast. So I'm going to take, and I'm going to put in probably about 1/2 cup of flour along with that. I'm going to mix this together, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to pause because I'm going to proof it. I want to make sure that the yeast is good. So I'm going to go ahead and proof it for about 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to let it develop into kind of a sponge. And if we come back and it's coming back and developing nicely, we know the yeast is fine. If not, don't use it. It isn't going to rise. All right, let me scrape this down. that's nice and blended in nicely. So let's go ahead and wait about 20 to 30 minutes and we'll see what happens. Don't go away. I don't know how easy this is for you to see, but if you can see bubbles appearing in the proofing mix, that's exactly what you should see. I'm going to wait for a little while longer to make sure that it bubbles enough, but that's showing that the yeast is active and it's okay to be used. Okay, now that the yeast has proofed, and it is proof now, we know that the yeast is good and the bread is going to rise. We can go ahead and run our other ingredients. All right, let's go ahead and let's put in our butter. And the butter should be at room temperature. It wasn't, it just come out of the refrigerator, so I cheated a little bit with the microwave. We'll go ahead and add our eggs. Our salt. And our lemon zest. All right, now let's go ahead and mix this. All right, now let's go ahead and add our cinnamon, our cardamom, our nutmeg, and our vanilla. Now let's go ahead and mix this all together, and once this is mixed together, then we can put in our flour and let it come up to good consistency. All right, let's go ahead and scrape the sides of the bowl down. And let's add another couple of cups of flour. You should use about 4 cups of flour for this recipe. This will give us, 2.5, somewhere around in there. So we'll probably need some more, but let's just go ahead and do this just to get it blended in. Okay, this is a nice wet mixture, just about where it should be. So let's go ahead and let's add another half cup of flour, and we'll see where we are. All right, much better. It's still incorporated very nicely, but it's still too liquid, or still too moist So I'm going to put in another half cup of flour. And we'll see what this looks like. Okay, the dough's starting to look like dough, but it's still pretty moist. So what I'm going to do here, the dough looks good, but it's still quite moist. So what I'm going to do here is it's about time to add the raisins and the fruit. So I'm going to go ahead, and I stirred this earlier, and they seem to have plumped up quite a bit. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and strain it. And this gets the brandy out of it. Now, or I'm sorry, the rum. Now that we have the rum out of it, what we can do is we can go back and we can put our fruit into the bread. And I'm not going to put it in all at once, because you want to make sure that you don't have just all fruit and raisins and nuts and no dough. So let's go ahead and let's put about half this in. And we'll go ahead and we'll blend that. We'll need that all in. You can definitely tell we need some more flour with that. Now here's where I always give you the warning about going easy when you put in flour at this stage, because if you yank this up too high and let it go, you're going to get a flour bath. It's just about the right consistency. So what I'm going to do is, to make sure, I'm going to let this knead for about 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. You don't need to stand here and wait for this. I'll come back. Okay, it's been about the right time. So let's go ahead and let's pull this out. Let's see if it's ready for us. The dough is nice and moist. It pulls off the hook reasonably easy. I'd say that's just about right. So now let's go ahead, and I've already prepared a bowl, and I sprayed a little vegetable spray in here. Let's go ahead and put it in there, cover it, let's let it rise now. Alright, let's put a little plastic wrap on here, because we don't want this to dry out. We want it to rise, but we still want it to remain moist on the top, so that way it rises sufficiently. I'm going to put that on the stove. I'm going to turn the oven on at 250 degrees, but I'm going to put this on the top of it. That way this will be warm, but not hot, and it'll help it rise a little faster. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to let it rise for about an hour. I'll see you then. Don't go away far. We'll be right back. Well, it's been a little over an hour, and it looks like the dough has risen very nicely. So let's go ahead and we're going to roll it out and we're going to form our loaf. So the first thing we want to do is we want to sprinkle a little flour. All right. And again, we want to knead this a little bit to make sure everything's well blended in there. And you'll see once in a while a raisin or a piece of fruit or something like that will fall out. That's all right, just push it back in. All right. All right, now let's go ahead and we're going to start rolling this out. And again, like we did with the Hoska, we want to kind of make it resemble a rectangle, although it isn't going to be perfect. All right. Now there's a few raisins and fruit that popped out of there. That's all right. We're not going to worry about those. All right, now we want to go back to our marzipan that we made. If I can get into it. All right. And what we're going to do is we want to put this kind of in a little channel in our bread, such as this. All right, so we're going to there. All right, there's our marzipan vein in there. Now we're going to roll our loaf over. Now make sure this is all well crimped down here. All right. this on a piece of parchment paper, and, well, guess what? We're going to let it rise for a little bit more. So once again, okay, it's been about another 50 minutes, and it looks like the loaf has risen nicely. So what we're going to do before we bake it is we're going to do like we did with Hoska, and we're just going to brush a little butter. You're just using a pastry brush over the loaf. This will let it brown, but it's not going to get quite as dark as if we put an egg wash on it. And we really don't want that in these holiday breads. We kind of like them a little bit brown, but not too brown. And especially in this case, since with Stollen, we either put a frosting or we put a confectioner's powder over the top of it. Okay, now that we have this, let's go ahead and I'm going to bake it at 350 for probably 30 to 40 minutes, something like that, and then we're going to go ahead and check it. So here we go in the oven. And I'm going to set the timer for about 30 minutes. Let's see what it looks like then. Alright, as I've told you before, I'm going to go ahead and cut it here so you don't have to sit there and wait for 30 minutes, but I'll see you when we get back. Don't go far. Okay, it's been about 35 minutes, so I took a look in the oven and it's time to come out. So let's go ahead and pull our loaf out. Okay, as you can see, our loaf is browned nicely. It has kept sealed in here, although it did, and I'll show this to you on this side, it did come up a little bit, but you see it's still sealed in here, so we're fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this loaf, I'm going to put it on the cooling rack. Alright, I've let it cool down for a while, and although it's not completely cool, it is getting late and I want to go ahead and finish this up. But let's go ahead, and I mentioned earlier that there were two finishes that you could put on a loaf of Stollen. One was either put margarine or butter over the top of this, I prefer butter, and then put some confectioner's sugar over that. Or you could take the confectioner's sugar and mix it with water. Go ahead and just put a frosting on this. I'm just going to do the butter and the confectioner's sugar here. So let's go ahead and just spread this on. Now let's go ahead and let's put the confectioner's sugar. Over the top. Just like that. Is our Stollen. Shall we go ahead and cut it open? Alright, let's take a look at this. It actually looks very, very good. Notice our texture is very, very good. Notice where our marzipan vein ends down in here. So at this point, I think we have a success. Again, thank you for participating. God bless. Take care. Remember, cooking should always be fun. And I'll see you next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.